Well, I'm now coming to a case which is very close to everybody's mind, AIDS. And as you will see, a similar mechanism operated in the emergence of AIDS early in the 1980s. So you all remember how AIDS was first detected among American homosexual men in 1982, and how the viruses responsible for this disease, HIV-1 and then HIV-2, were isolated at the Pasteur Institute by Luc Montagnier's group, including Françoise Barré-Sinoussi. This is one of the very first pictures of the AIDS virus. Here is the AIDS virus. As you probably know, viruses develop inside cells. So this is a cell, this is the surface of the cell, and when the virus is ripe, it burgeons at the surface of the cell, and then it can disseminate to other cells, and so the infection can diffuse. And the next slide shows the group of Luc Montagnier. At the time, this is Luc Montagnier, this is Françoise Barré-Sinoussi, and this is Sherman. So you know that the epidemic was partially controlled in the Western world thanks to strict measures of protection, of prevention, and now there is also the antiviral products, but the disease is still spreading in many other countries, in Africa and also in Asia. And as of today, AIDS has become the most deadly infectious disease on Earth. You realize a disease which was totally unknown in 1980 is now the one that kills the most large number of people on Earth. And presently there are about 35 million individuals who are infected by the virus. They are so-called seropositive, and about 1.5 to 2 million die from it each year. So as I mentioned, there are antiviral treatments which have been developed. They start to be accessible to developing countries, but they only stabilize the infection. Once you stop the drugs, the virus comes back. So there is no real cure of AIDS, and as you know, we have not yet found a vaccine against AIDS. But why I'm speaking about AIDS is try to explain you how this disease emerged. And I will start by recalling a fact which has remained largely unknown to a large part of the public. And I will go back to Yambuku, which I mentioned a little while ago when there was this Ebola epidemics. The members of the mission which was sent there by WHO to find out the cause of this Ebola epidemics, they took samples of serum from the 659 inhabitants of this small village. And they took the serum back to the fridge in the CDC in the USA. So this was in 1976. In 1985, at a time where the AIDS epidemic had started to spread worldwide, they wondered whether there might have been already AIDS patients or AIDS seropositive in this small village of Yambuku in 1976. So they tested them, and they found that 5 of the 659 were seropositive for HIV. So this showed that AIDS was already present in that village 9 years before. This was not so surprising, because already in 1985, it was believed that AIDS was coming from Africa. But what is more surprising is what happened next. The CDC sent a new mission to Yambuku to see how the epidemics had evolved there. And what they found is that there was, again, 1% of the people who were seropositive. In other words, there had been no change in 9 years, while in the rest of the world, the epidemics had exploded. So this means that, in fact, AIDS might have been present in small villages like that for years, but nobody knew about it, because if you have 1% of the population with AIDS, they will die from various things, because when you have AIDS, you can have tuberculosis or many things, so nobody would notice anything. But what happened is that there has been a lot of depopulation of the rural area, like in the rest of the world, people think that life will be better if they go to towns. So presumably, someone who was seropositive went to Kinshasa, thinking he would have a better life. But what he found there was a city with a lot of prostitution, with intravenous drug users, with everything which is needed for transmission of the virus. So the virus could spread in Kinshasa. Then, meanwhile, there is a development of international travel. People would go to places like Kinshasa, go to the rest of the world, spread the virus in the rest of the world. And the final step was probably in the United States, where the homosexual populations are very strange habits at the time. They had a very large number of partners, and that was another way to spread the disease. So you see that, again, the reason why this epidemic started is because of the changes in the life. But I'll come back to this in a second. You still wonder where the virus was coming from. Well, this is rather clear. The AIDS virus is a monkey virus. This kind of tree here shows whenever you have branches which are close, it means that the virus strains are close to one another. And these are, when you see HIV, these are HIV, human viruses, and SIV is a similar virus which exists in monkey, simian viruses. And so you see that gorilla, chimpanzee, and so on, all these monkeys, they have viruses which are very similar to the AIDS virus. But they are not sick from it. They are what we would call reservoirs. So nobody can tell that, let's say, a chimpanzee is carrying an SIV virus. But when you look at the branches, you see that HIV-1, the HIV-1 strains, they are very, very close to strains of chimpanzee virus. And in fact, you couldn't tell whether this is a human virus or a chimpanzee virus. So in fact, HIV is a virus from monkey. Now, how did it go from monkey to humans? That is very easy to understand, because as I mentioned already before, people there eat monkeys. And here you see the carving of monkey on a market in this region of Africa. And you see, you see that this man here is full of monkey blood. So if he's carving a monkey that has this SIV and he has a small lesion in the hand, the virus can easily get in. So here is what is believed to be the most probable scenario for the emergence of AIDS. Originally, you have this virus which is carried by monkey AIDS population and doesn't do them any harm. Then you have people eating them and carving them so they get the virus. Then you can have the virus staying at a very low frequency in small villages. But if by chance one person who is seropositive, because it prefers to go to towns, goes to Kinshasa, it will then transmit this virus to the whole population in Kinshasa and from there to the rest of the world. So it is exactly what I told you before. The virus existed. It did not do any real harm, but because of man, of his new habits, then it can be transmitted to the whole human population. Now, there are, in fact, many cases similar, and I won't list all of them, just one of them very briefly, which shows that the emergence is caused by mankind, is mad cow disease. This is a picture of a mad cow, and again, there it is because we changed our habit in feeding cattle that we had this dissemination of the mad cow disease, which can then be transmitted to human in the form of what is called Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. So this is the major reason why you have new diseases, which I just explained.